Socrates, born around 470 BC in Athens, Greece, is often regarded as one of the most influential figures in the history of human thought. His life and work laid the foundation for Western philosophy, and his approach to knowledge, morality, and inquiry transformed how humans think about themselves and the world. Unlike many thinkers of his time, Socrates was not interested in producing written works or leaving behind grand theories in books. Instead, he devoted his life to engaging with people in dialogue, seeking truth through conversation, and challenging conventional wisdom. This approach, radical for its time, marked the beginning of a new era in human thought, an era where questioning, reasoning, and ethical reflection became central to understanding life. Socrates' early life in Athens influenced his philosophy deeply. Athens, during the 5th century BCE, was a city-state experiencing tremendous intellectual and political growth. Democracy was developing, art and literature flourished, and debates on morality, justice, and the nature of knowledge were becoming central to public life. Socrates grew up in this intellectually rich environment, which likely contributed to his insatiable curiosity about human behavior and morality. Though his father, Sophroniscus, was a sculptor, and his mother, Phaenarete, a midwife, Socrates did not follow in their professions. Instead, he dedicated himself to philosophical inquiry, believing that the pursuit of wisdom was more important than material wealth or social status. What made Socrates revolutionary was his method of engaging with ideas. Before Socrates, Greek thought was largely shaped by pre-Socratic philosophers such as Thales, Anaximander, and Heraclitus, who focused primarily on natural philosophy, the study of the physical world and the universe. These thinkers asked questions about the nature of reality, the elements, and the cosmos. Socrates, however, shifted the focus from the external world to the internal world of human experience. He asked questions not about the stars or the elements, but about virtue, justice, piety, and the essence of human life. In doing so, he transformed philosophy into a practical and ethical pursuit, rather than a purely speculative or scientific one. Socrates' revolutionary approach was also evident in his technique, now famously known as the Socratic method. This method was based on dialogue rather than lecture, encouraging his interlocutors to examine their beliefs critically. Socrates would ask probing questions, often starting with simple concepts and gradually exposing contradictions in a person's thinking. For example, if someone claimed to know what justice was, Socrates would ask a series of questions that revealed inconsistencies or assumptions in their understanding. This method forced people to think deeply and examine their beliefs, moving them closer to genuine understanding. Unlike teachers who imposed knowledge on students, Socrates encouraged independent thought, helping others discover truth through reasoned dialogue. The Socratic method was revolutionary not just in form, but also in its philosophical implications. It emphasized that wisdom begins with acknowledging one's ignorance. Socrates famously declared, "I know that I know nothing," a statement that underscored the importance of humility in intellectual inquiry. In a society where claims of wisdom were often tied to social status, wealth, or rhetoric, Socrates' insistence on questioning and critical thinking challenged existing power structures. He taught that true understanding cannot be claimed lightly. It must be sought through rigorous self-examination and rational debate. Socrates' focus on ethical questions also set him apart from his predecessors. While earlier philosophers speculated about the natural world, Socrates was concerned with how humans should live and act. He explored topics such as virtue, justice, courage, temperance, and the good life. These questions were not abstract, they were practical, directly connected to the conduct of daily life. By asking what it means to be a good person, how to act justly, or what constitutes moral courage, Socrates invited individuals to reflect on their own actions and responsibilities. His philosophy emphasized that knowledge and ethics are intertwined. To know the good is to do the good. In other words, moral understanding was inseparable from intellectual understanding, a perspective that challenged traditional beliefs about the separation of thought and action. Another aspect of Socrates' revolutionary influence was his willingness to challenge authority and conventional opinion. In Athens, many people accepted social norms, religious practices, and political traditions without question. Socrates, however, openly questioned these assumptions. He asked difficult questions about the justice of the Athenian legal system, the morality of political decisions, and the integrity of religious rituals. This critical stance made him both admired and controversial. While many Athenians were inspired by his commitment to truth and virtue, others saw him as a threat to social order and traditional values. His fearless questioning of authority demonstrated that intellectual courage is as important as moral courage, a principle that has influenced generations of thinkers and reformers. Socrates' revolutionary impact was not limited to his lifetime. It extended through his students, most notably Plato. Plato recorded Socrates' dialogues, preserving his methods and ideas for future generations. Through Plato, Socratic philosophy became a cornerstone of Western thought. Philosophers such as Aristotle, the Stoics, and even modern thinkers have drawn on Socratic principles, applying them to ethics, epistemology, and political theory. Socrates' emphasis on questioning assumptions, seeking clarity, and prioritizing ethical reflection has become central to education, critical thinking, and philosophical inquiry worldwide. The significance of Socrates' contribution lies not only in the ideas themselves, but also in the method of engagement he championed. By prioritizing dialogue, self-examination, and ethical reasoning, Socrates introduced a new standard for intellectual integrity. In contrast to those who claimed authority based on tradition, rhetoric, or power, Socrates modeled a philosophy based on reason, courage, and humility. His approach taught that the pursuit of truth is a collective and ongoing process, requiring honesty, patience, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Socrates' life also illustrates the practical challenges of living according to one's philosophical convictions. His refusal to abandon his principles, even in the face of death, exemplifies the integration of philosophy and life. In 399 BC, Socrates was tried for corrupting the youth of Athens and impiety toward the gods. Despite being offered the chance to escape punishment or recant his teachings, he accepted the verdict and drank hemlock, demonstrating unwavering commitment to truth and moral integrity. This act of philosophical courage has inspired countless individuals to value principles over personal safety or convenience, reinforcing the revolutionary nature of his philosophy. Finally, Socrates' influence extends beyond philosophy into education, politics, and even everyday decision-making. The Socratic method remains a central pedagogical tool in modern classrooms, law schools, and debate societies. His insistence on examining beliefs critically informs scientific inquiry, ethical deliberation, and civic engagement. By emphasizing reasoned questioning and reflective thought, Socrates helped cultivate a culture in which ideas are scrutinized, assumptions are challenged, and individuals are empowered to think independently. His legacy demonstrates that revolution in thought does not always require armies or legislation. It can emerge from a persistent commitment to dialogue, questioning, and intellectual courage. In conclusion, Socrates was not merely a philosopher of his time. He was a revolutionary thinker who transformed the way humans approach knowledge, morality, and society. By focusing on human experience rather than the natural world, developing the Socratic method of inquiry, and insisting on ethical reflection, he challenged traditional norms and inspired generations of thinkers. His legacy endures because he demonstrated that the pursuit of truth requires courage, humility, and rigorous questioning. Socrates' life and philosophy remind us that true progress in thought comes not from accepting received wisdom, but from continuously seeking understanding through dialogue, reflection, and ethical consideration. Socrates' influence on education and intellectual culture cannot be overstated. His method of inquiry, emphasizing questions over answers, transformed the way knowledge is pursued. In modern education, the Socratic method remains a foundational teaching tool. Law schools, philosophy classes, and debate forums frequently employ this technique, guiding students to analyze assumptions, construct arguments, and critically evaluate evidence. This approach cultivates independent thinking, encouraging learners to move beyond rote memorization toward genuine understanding. By fostering intellectual curiosity and self-reflection, Socrates' approach helps individuals navigate complex ethical and practical problems, demonstrating that philosophy is not merely theoretical, but deeply relevant to everyday life. The philosophical impact of Socrates also extends to ethics and morality. His insistence that virtue and knowledge are intertwined has shaped centuries of moral philosophy. The idea that understanding what is good naturally leads to doing what is good has influenced ethical theories, from Platonic ideals to modern humanistic thought. Socrates challenged people to consider the consequences of their actions and to reflect on whether they were living justly. This focus on self-examination has profound implications for personal development, social responsibility, and governance. Leaders, thinkers, and citizens alike are encouraged to prioritize moral reasoning, inspired by Socrates' example of principled inquiry and courage in the face of societal pressure. Socrates' dialogues, as recorded by Plato, reveal a thinker deeply engaged with questions of human nature and society. The dialogues cover topics such as justice, courage, piety, and the good life, providing a roadmap for ethical inquiry. Works like The Republic and Apology illustrate Socratic dialogue in action, showing how reasoning and questioning can uncover deeper truths about morality, knowledge, and human behavior. Even though Socrates did not write his own texts, these records allow modern audiences to engage with his ideas directly. The preserved dialogues ensure that Socrates' revolutionary approach continues to influence not only philosophers, but anyone committed to understanding life and society more profoundly. Socrates also redefined the relationship between the individual and society. By questioning widely accepted norms and traditions, he emphasized that personal integrity and critical thought should not be sacrificed for conformity. His trial and ultimate execution highlight the tension between independent thinking and societal expectations. Choosing death over compromising his principles, Socrates exemplified the courage and moral responsibility that come with challenging injustice and dogma. This act has inspired countless individuals to value truth, reason, and ethical conduct above convenience or personal safety, reinforcing the revolutionary character of his philosophy. Moreover, Socrates' legacy influenced not just Plato and Aristotle, but the entire trajectory of Western philosophy. His emphasis on dialogue, logic, and ethics became foundational for subsequent philosophical traditions, including Stoicism, skepticism, and Enlightenment thought. The idea that knowledge arises through careful questioning and reflection has informed scientific reasoning, democratic debate, and educational methodologies. In politics and civic life, Socratic inquiry encourages accountability, transparency, and ethical deliberation, highlighting how philosophical principles can guide practical decision-making. His approach demonstrates that intellectual revolution does not solely occur through new discoveries, but also through transforming the way humans think, reason, and engage with the world. The universality of Socratic ideas also underscores their enduring relevance. Across centuries and cultures, the principles of critical thinking, self-examination, and ethical reflection have resonated with scholars, leaders, and ordinary individuals alike. Socrates' emphasis on examining one's own beliefs resonates with modern psychological and philosophical practices aimed at self-improvement, mindfulness, and rational decision-making. By insisting that wisdom begins with recognizing one's ignorance, Socrates empowers people to approach life with humility, curiosity, and an ongoing commitment to personal and moral growth. Socrates' approach to philosophy also challenges modern societies to value truth and reason over rhetoric and superficial knowledge. In a world often dominated by opinions, social pressures, and instant information, the Socratic emphasis on inquiry reminds us that understanding requires patience, dialogue, and careful reflection. His philosophy teaches that meaningful knowledge is not simply accumulated. It is cultivated through questioning, reasoning, and ethical deliberation. This insight remains critical for navigating contemporary challenges in education, politics, science, and personal life. Finally, Socrates' revolutionary legacy lies in his ability to inspire generations to think differently. He demonstrated that questioning assumptions, seeking truth, and striving for ethical integrity are not only intellectual exercises, but acts of courage and social transformation. His influence continues in classrooms, philosophical discourse, political debates, and the daily decisions of individuals who aim to live thoughtfully and justly. Socrates' life and teachings exemplify the transformative power of inquiry, showing that one individual, committed to reason and virtue, can change the trajectory of human thought for millennia. In essence, Socrates redefined what it means to be a philosopher. He shifted the focus from explaining the physical world to understanding human life, ethics, and society. Through dialogue, critical thinking, and a relentless pursuit of truth, he revolutionized human thought and inquiry. His legacy is not just a historical achievement, but a living practice, reminding us that the journey toward wisdom is continuous, challenging, and profoundly rewarding. Socrates' influence endures because he demonstrated that true revolution begins in the mind and in the moral courage to question, understand, and act rightly. Socrates, the renowned Athenian philosopher, did not leave behind any written works, yet his ideas have profoundly shaped human thought. Among his many contributions, the most revolutionary and enduring is undoubtedly the Socratic method. This method, based on the art of questioning, transformed the approach to learning, ethics, and reasoning in ways that continue to influence education, philosophy, and critical thinking even today. Unlike earlier philosophers who focused primarily on natural phenomena or abstract theorizing, Socrates concentrated on human understanding, morality, and the pursuit of truth. His method of inquiry was both practical and transformative, fundamentally changing the way individuals confront knowledge and explore ideas. The Socratic method is characterized by a series of carefully crafted questions designed to challenge assumptions, uncover contradictions, and stimulate critical thought. Instead of offering direct answers or didactic instruction, Socrates would engage his interlocutors in dialogue. For instance, if a person claimed to understand a concept like justice, Socrates would ask them to define it. Once a definition was proposed, he would continue to probe. Does this apply universally? Are there situations where it fails? Through this persistent questioning, participants were encouraged to examine their beliefs more deeply, often realizing that their understanding was incomplete or inconsistent. This process of discovery not only fostered intellectual humility, but also promoted self-awareness, as individuals were forced to confront the limits of their own knowledge. The revolutionary nature of the Socratic method lies in its emphasis on dialogue rather than monologue. Traditional teaching methods in ancient Athens often involved the teacher imparting knowledge to passive students. Socrates, however, rejected this approach. He believed that learning was not about memorizing information or accepting authority blindly, but about engaging actively with ideas. In this way, the Socratic method encourages active participation, reflection, and analytical reasoning. It turns education into a collaborative process, where both teacher and student explore the subject matter together. This approach was radical in its time and continues to inform modern pedagogy, demonstrating that questioning is more powerful than simple instruction. The Socratic method also reflects Socrates' belief that wisdom begins with acknowledging ignorance. His famous declaration, "I know that I know nothing," illustrates this principle. By exposing contradictions in thought through questioning, Socrates guided others to recognize that claiming absolute knowledge is often misguided. This recognition of one's own limitations is a cornerstone of critical thinking. It teaches individuals to approach problems with humility, to analyze evidence carefully, and to remain open to new insights. In essence, the Socratic method is not just a tool for intellectual debate. It is a framework for lifelong learning and personal growth. Historically, the method was applied in the context of ethical and philosophical inquiry. Socrates often engaged citizens of Athens in conversations about virtue, justice, courage, and the good life. His questions were designed to reveal the inconsistencies in commonly held beliefs and to encourage reflection on moral principles. For example, in discussions about justice, Socrates would challenge conventional notions that equated justice with social advantage or obedience to law. Through questioning, he revealed that true justice could not be understood superficially, but required careful reasoning and ethical examination. This approach transformed philosophical inquiry from abstract speculation into a practical tool for understanding human behavior and societal norms. The method is structured in several stages, which reflect Socratic reasoning. The first stage involves posing a clear and precise question about a concept or belief. The second stage examines the response critically, seeking contradictions or ambiguities. The third stage involves further questioning to refine understanding and eliminate inconsistencies. Finally, participants are guided toward a more coherent and reasoned conclusion, though the process rarely results in absolute certainty. This iterative approach mirrors scientific inquiry, where hypotheses are tested, challenged, and refined. Socrates' innovation was to apply such rigorous reasoning to ethical and philosophical matters, laying the groundwork for systematic thinking and rational discourse. One of the most powerful aspects of the Socratic method is its capacity to expose assumptions that often go unquestioned. In everyday life, people frequently operate under implicit beliefs inherited from tradition, culture, or social authority. Socrates' questioning disrupts these assumptions, prompting individuals to examine why they hold certain beliefs and whether those beliefs are logically and morally sound. This process fosters intellectual independence and encourages critical evaluation rather than passive acceptance. In modern terms, the Socratic method can be seen as a precursor to scientific skepticism, philosophical inquiry, and rational problem-solving, highlighting its enduring relevance across disciplines. Socrates' approach was not merely theoretical. It had profound practical implications. By encouraging individuals to think critically, question authority, and reflect on moral principles, the Socratic method contributed to the development of a more engaged and conscientious citizenry. In the democratic context of Athens, this was particularly significant. Citizens were expected to participate in governance and public debate, and critical thinking was essential for informed decision-making. Socrates' insistence on dialogue and reason challenged people to engage thoughtfully with civic life, emphasizing that knowledge and virtue are inseparable in creating a just society. The effectiveness of the Socratic method also lies in its adaptability. While Socrates primarily applied it to philosophical and ethical discussions, the method can be employed across disciplines. In law, educators use it to train students to analyze cases, identify inconsistencies, and construct reasoned arguments. In literature, it encourages readers to explore themes, motives, and interpretations critically. In science and mathematics, questioning assumptions and testing reasoning mirrors the same underlying principle of rigorous analysis. This versatility demonstrates why the Socratic method has endured for over 2 millennia, influencing countless thinkers and pedagogical practices around the world. Critically, the Socratic method promotes collaborative thinking rather than adversarial debate. While it exposes contradictions, the goal is not to humiliate or win arguments, but to guide participants toward clarity and understanding. This collaborative aspect fosters mutual respect and intellectual openness, creating an environment where ideas can be explored safely and constructively. By emphasizing inquiry over assertion, the method teaches that truth is discovered collectively through careful reasoning rather than imposed unilaterally. This principle resonates in modern educational and professional contexts, where teamwork, discussion, and critical evaluation are essential to problem-solving. Socrates' commitment to questioning and critical thinking ultimately led to both admiration and controversy. His method exposed deeply held beliefs and challenged social, political, and religious authorities. While many Athenians respected his dedication to truth and moral reflection, others viewed him as a destabilizing influence. This tension culminated in his trial and execution in 399 BC, charged with corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. Yet even in the face of death, Socrates remained steadfast in his principles, demonstrating that the pursuit of truth and the practice of critical reasoning are inseparable from personal integrity. The legacy of the Socratic method extends far beyond Socrates' lifetime. Through his students, especially Plato, the method became codified and transmitted to future generations. Plato's dialogues preserve Socratic questioning as a central feature, allowing readers to witness Socratic reasoning in action. These works have inspired centuries of philosophical thought, scientific inquiry, and educational practice. By cultivating the skill of asking meaningful questions, the Socratic method has empowered individuals to challenge assumptions, evaluate evidence, and approach problems with analytical rigor, a revolutionary shift in human cognition. Finally, the Socratic method embodies a philosophy of learning and living. It teaches that knowledge is not a static possession but a dynamic process, requiring curiosity, reflection, and dialogue. By exposing contradictions, promoting humility, and guiding reasoned inquiry, the method fosters intellectual growth, ethical awareness, and self-understanding. Socrates' innovation was not merely in the questions themselves, but in creating a framework for lifelong critical engagement with ideas. This approach has transformed education, philosophy, and society, illustrating that the art of questioning is one of the most powerful tools for human progress. The Socratic method's influence on modern education and intellectual development is profound. Many contemporary pedagogical approaches owe their effectiveness to Socratic principles. In law schools, professors use Socratic questioning to train students to think critically, anticipate counterarguments, and analyze cases rigorously. By asking students to explain their reasoning, instructors foster an environment where assumptions are examined and conclusions are tested. This approach not only sharpens analytical skills, but also develops intellectual confidence. Beyond law, the method is widely used in philosophy, ethics, political science, and even business education, demonstrating its versatility in cultivating thoughtful, reflective, and independent thinkers. In addition to academic applications, the Socratic method serves as a guide for personal development. By encouraging individuals to question their beliefs, values, and decisions, the method promotes self-awareness and ethical reflection. In an age where information is abundant but critical evaluation is often lacking, the practice of questioning assumptions is invaluable. Individuals trained in Socratic reasoning learn to differentiate between superficial opinions and reasoned knowledge, fostering clarity in decision-making and problem-solving. This capacity to think critically about one's own beliefs and those of others is a skill that transcends disciplines, contributing to responsible citizenship, effective leadership, and informed engagement in society. The method also enhances dialogue and communication. Socratic questioning prioritizes understanding over confrontation, encouraging participants to listen carefully, articulate reasoning clearly, and respond thoughtfully. In contrast to debates aimed at winning arguments, the Socratic method creates an atmosphere of cooperative inquiry, where the goal is mutual understanding rather than dominance. This approach fosters respect for differing viewpoints, tolerance for ambiguity, and openness to revising one's own beliefs when confronted with evidence or reasoned argument. These skills are essential in today's interconnected world, where collaboration, negotiation, and intercultural understanding are increasingly important. Socratic questioning has also played a critical role in the development of science and rational inquiry. The method's insistence on examining assumptions, testing ideas, and reasoning logically mirrors the scientific process. By encouraging critical evaluation rather than blind acceptance, Socrates laid the groundwork for a culture of inquiry that values evidence and rational argument. Scientists, philosophers, and educators have drawn upon this method to refine hypotheses, challenge prevailing theories, and advance knowledge. In this sense, Socrates' innovation was not limited to ethics or philosophy. It contributed to the broader human endeavor of understanding the world through reason and systematic inquiry. Furthermore, the Socratic method has profound ethical implications. Socrates believed that uncovering contradictions and examining assumptions was essential not only for intellectual clarity, but also for moral development. By questioning what is just, good, or virtuous, individuals confront the foundations of their ethical beliefs and align their actions with reasoned principles. This integration of intellectual and moral inquiry is a hallmark of Socratic philosophy. It suggests that ethical behavior is not arbitrary or socially imposed, but arises from thoughtful reflection and understanding. In this way, the Socratic method remains relevant in contemporary discussions of ethics, leadership, and civic responsibility. Historical examples illustrate the transformative impact of Socratic questioning. In Plato's dialogues, such as Euthyphro, Apology, and Republic, Socrates engages interlocutors in rigorous examination of fundamental concepts like piety, justice, and knowledge. Through these dialogues, readers witness how questioning reveals inconsistencies, stimulates deeper thought, and guides participants toward greater understanding. For instance, in Euthyphro, Socrates questions the nature of piety, challenging the assumption that it is defined merely by adherence to traditional religious practices. The dialogue demonstrates how Socratic questioning compels individuals to rethink assumptions and pursue more coherent and reasoned definitions. Such examples underscore the method's enduring value as a tool for intellectual exploration and moral reasoning. The method's revolutionary nature is also evident in its emphasis on collaborative learning. Socratic dialogue is inherently interactive, requiring active participation from all involved. Unlike didactic teaching methods, which often position the teacher as the sole source of knowledge, the Socratic method treats knowledge as a shared pursuit. Participants engage in reasoning together, exposing flaws, refining definitions, and constructing insights collaboratively. This process not only enhances understanding, but also cultivates skills in reasoning, communication, and ethical deliberation. By demonstrating that knowledge is co-created through dialogue, Socrates revolutionized the way humans approach learning and intellectual growth. Socrates' commitment to questioning also challenges the authority of dogma and tradition. In his time, Athenian society placed great emphasis on social norms, religious rituals, and civic conformity. Socratic questioning disrupted these conventions, prompting individuals to examine whether societal beliefs were rational, just, or ethical. This critical stance often brought Socrates into conflict with powerful interests, ultimately contributing to his trial and execution. However, it also illustrates the power of the Socratic method as a tool for societal reflection and reform. By empowering individuals to think independently, question assumptions, and challenge unjust practices, the method demonstrates that intellectual inquiry can be a catalyst for moral and social progress. Modern applications of the Socratic method extend far beyond formal education. In counseling, coaching, and leadership, Socratic questioning helps individuals explore goals, assumptions, and motivations, promoting self-awareness and personal growth. In everyday life, asking questions in the Socratic style encourages reflective thinking, better decision making, and ethical discernment. By challenging assumptions and probing reasoning, people can navigate complex situations with greater clarity and integrity. This universality underscores the enduring relevance of Socratic principles, demonstrating that the method is not limited to philosophers or scholars, but is a practical tool for living thoughtfully and responsibly. Moreover, the Socratic method fosters intellectual resilience. By exposing contradictions and testing ideas, individuals learn to tolerate ambiguity, embrace uncertainty, and refine their reasoning. This resilience is essential in a rapidly changing world, where information is abundant and claims to truth are often contested. Socratic questioning teaches that knowledge is provisional, subject to revision, and grounded in reasoned argument rather than authority or convenience. This mindset cultivates critical thinkers who are adaptable, reflective, and capable of engaging constructively with diverse perspectives. Finally, the revolutionary significance of the Socratic method lies in its enduring ability to shape human thought. It represents a paradigm shift from passive acceptance of received wisdom to active, critical engagement with ideas. By emphasizing questioning, dialogue, and ethical reflection, Socrates created a method that transforms not only the mind but also character. It encourages intellectual curiosity, moral integrity, and the pursuit of truth, values that remain central to education, philosophy, and civic life today. Socratic questioning demonstrates that the most profound revolutions in human history often occur not through conquest or legislation, but through the transformative power of ideas and disciplined practice of inquiry. Socrates, one of the most influential philosophers in history, is unique among great thinkers because he left no written records of his own ideas. Unlike many philosophers who document their theories and arguments for posterity, Socrates relied entirely on oral discourse to convey his philosophy. This choice, or perhaps circumstance, shaped not only how his teachings were transmitted, but also how philosophy developed after him. The fact that Socrates did not write down his thoughts is remarkable because it placed the responsibility for preserving his ideas on his students, especially Plato, whose writings provide the primary source of knowledge about Socrates today. Without Plato and other disciples, much of what we know about Socratic philosophy might have been lost to history. Socrates' decision not to write down his teachings was consistent with his belief in the power of dialogue. For Socrates, knowledge was not something static or fixed. It was discovered through questioning, discussion, and critical thinking. He believed that true understanding could only emerge through active engagement, rather than passive reading. In a sense, writing could never capture the dynamic nature of inquiry and debate that defined Socratic philosophy. By conversing with others in the marketplace, public spaces, or private homes, Socrates challenged people to think critically, defend their ideas, and examine their beliefs. This method of teaching emphasized process over content, prioritizing the development of reasoning skills and self-reflection rather than memorization of doctrine. The lack of written works also meant that Socrates' ideas were preserved indirectly. His students became the vessels through which his philosophy survived. Among them, Plato stands out as the most significant and influential. Plato, who studied under Socrates for many years, not only absorbed his teacher's ideas, but also systematized and documented them through dialogues. In these writings, Socrates often appears as the main character, guiding conversations on ethics, knowledge, justice, and the nature of the soul. While there is ongoing scholarly debate about which ideas in Plato's works originated with Socrates and which were Plato's own innovations, it is undeniable that Plato's dialogues served as the primary conduit for Socratic thought to reach future generations. The dialogues written by Plato take the form of conversational exchanges, reflecting the essence of Socratic teaching. Socrates is depicted engaging interlocutors in rigorous questioning, exposing contradictions, and guiding them toward deeper understanding. This literary format not only preserves Socratic ideas, but also mirrors his method of inquiry, allowing readers to experience the process of philosophical investigation. Dialogues such as Euthyphro, Apology, Crito, and Phaedo offer insight into Socratic philosophy, capturing his commitment to critical thinking, ethical reflection, and the pursuit of truth. The dialogue form ensures that Socrates' approach to learning, through active questioning and reasoned discussion, remains central, even in written form. Socrates' reliance on students for preservation also highlights the communal nature of his philosophy. He did not present himself as a solitary thinker with final answers, but as a guide who helped others cultivate wisdom. By transmitting his ideas orally, Socrates fostered a culture of intellectual engagement and dialogue. His students were not passive recipients. They were active participants in the philosophical process. This dynamic ensured that Socratic philosophy was alive, adaptable, and capable of evolving over time. Plato's writings, in particular, capture both the content of Socratic ideas and the spirit of inquiry that defined his teaching. The impact of Plato's preservation of Socratic thought cannot be overstated. Through Plato, Socrates' ideas influenced not only his immediate circle, but also subsequent generations of philosophers. Aristotle, who studied under Plato, absorbed and developed ideas that traced back to Socratic inquiry. Beyond Aristotle, the entire tradition of Western philosophy, encompassing Stoicism, Neoplatonism, Renaissance humanism, and Enlightenment thought, can trace intellectual roots to the Socratic method of questioning and ethical reflection. Without the written works of Plato, it is likely that Socrates' revolutionary approach to philosophy might have been forgotten or misunderstood. The reliance on students for preservation, however, also introduces challenges. Since Socrates did not leave his own texts, scholars must rely on the interpretations and representations of his students, particularly Plato, Xenophon, and Aristophanes, to reconstruct his philosophy. This reliance raises questions about the authenticity of the ideas attributed to Socrates. Plato, for example, may have infused his own philosophical concepts into dialogues featuring Socrates, blurring the distinction between teacher and student. Similarly, Xenophon's accounts emphasize different aspects of Socratic thought, often highlighting practical ethics over metaphysical inquiry. Even Aristophanes' comedic portrayal in The Clouds offers a satirical lens that contrasts with Plato's idealized Socrates. This plurality of sources provides a rich but complex tapestry of Socratic thought, illustrating both the breadth and interpretive challenges of his philosophical legacy. Despite these challenges, the fact that Socratic teachings survived at all is extraordinary. In an era when oral transmission was the primary means of knowledge preservation, the commitment of students like Plato ensured that Socratic philosophy endured across centuries. Plato's meticulous recording of dialogues, combined with his philosophical interpretations, created a lasting legacy that shaped Western thought. Moreover, the method of presentation through dialogue rather than exposition reflects Socrates' enduring commitment to inquiry, demonstrating that the process of discovery is as important as the conclusions themselves. In addition to Plato, other students and contemporaries also contributed to preserving Socratic ideas. Xenophon, a historian and soldier, recorded Socrates' conversations with an emphasis on practical morality and civic responsibility. Aristophanes, though satirical, highlighted how Socrates' unconventional methods challenged societal norms, providing cultural context for understanding his influence. Together, these sources offer complementary perspectives, allowing modern readers to reconstruct Socratic philosophy with greater nuance. The combination of philosophical, historical, and literary accounts creates a multifaceted image of Socrates, emphasizing his originality, ethical rigor, and transformative approach to thought. Socrates' lack of written works also reflects his philosophical priorities. He valued the cultivation of wisdom over fame or intellectual legacy. His teaching was grounded in immediate engagement with people and ideas, focusing on how individuals could live ethically and think critically in their own lives. Writing down his ideas would have fixed them, potentially limiting dialogue and discouraging independent reflection. By relying on oral transmission, Socrates ensured that his philosophy remained dynamic, adaptable, and participatory, emphasizing learning as an active, collaborative process rather than a passive reception of information. Finally, the survival of Socratic philosophy through students like Plato underscores the importance of mentorship and intellectual community. Socrates' approach demonstrates that ideas can endure beyond an individual's lifetime when nurtured within a community committed to inquiry, dialogue, and ethical reflection. Plato's dialogues not only preserve the content of Socratic thought, but also transmit the methods and spirit of inquiry that define his philosophy. Through this transmission, Socrates continues to inspire critical thinking, ethical reflection, and the pursuit of wisdom, thousands of years after his death. Socrates, the legendary Athenian philosopher, is remembered not only for his contributions to philosophy, but also for his uncompromising commitment to questioning and challenging traditional beliefs. His approach to inquiry and his insistence on moral and intellectual honesty set him apart from his contemporaries, ultimately leading to one of the most famous trials in history and his execution in 399 BC. This event highlights the profound tension between individual philosophical pursuit and societal norms, and it underscores the revolutionary nature of Socrates' life and thought. In ancient Athens, religion, politics, and social customs were deeply intertwined. Traditional beliefs and practices were considered the backbone of society, forming the moral, spiritual, and civic framework that guided citizens' lives. Athenian democracy was emerging, and citizens were expected to participate actively in public life, adhering to social norms and respecting established authorities. In this environment, questioning fundamental assumptions was not only unusual but potentially threatening. Socrates' method of persistent questioning and critical dialogue, which sought to expose ignorance and challenge superficial understanding, inevitably confronted the foundations of Athenian life. Socrates' challenges were not abstract or theoretical. They directly engaged with widely held beliefs about religion, morality, and governance. For example, he questioned the traditional conception of piety and the interpretation of divine will. In dialogues such as Plato's Euthyphro, Socrates asks probing questions about what constitutes piety, exposing inconsistencies in common understandings of religious duty. By demonstrating that conventional definitions were insufficient or contradictory, Socrates encouraged individuals to rethink their assumptions about the gods and moral obligations. Such questioning was radical in a society where reverence for the gods was considered essential to civic and personal well-being. In addition to religious beliefs, Socrates challenged social and ethical norms. He questioned the values that guided political leaders, public officials, and ordinary citizens, insisting that ethical conduct must be grounded in reason rather than tradition or convenience. For instance, he examined concepts such as justice and virtue, revealing that commonly accepted definitions often lacked coherence or moral depth. Socrates' insistence on critical reflection implied that many individuals who claimed to possess wisdom or moral authority were, in fact, ignorant of true ethical principles. This critique of social norms and authority figures was not merely intellectual. It carried political implications in a city where public opinion and civic participation were central. The confrontational nature of Socratic inquiry eventually drew the attention and ire of many powerful Athenians. His method exposed contradictions in the beliefs of prominent citizens, embarrassing them in public discussions and undermining their perceived authority. Socrates did not shy away from uncomfortable truths or popular opinion. He persistently questioned those in power, emphasizing moral responsibility and intellectual honesty. While this approach won him followers who admired his integrity and wisdom, it also created resentment and suspicion among those who felt challenged or threatened by his ideas. Socrates' questioning extended to the young men of Athens, whom he engaged in philosophical discussions. Critics accused him of corrupting the youth by encouraging them to challenge established norms and think independently. In a society that valued conformity and respect for authority, this was seen as dangerous. The accusation that Socrates was corrupting the youth reflected broader anxieties about social stability and the influence of new ideas that questioned traditional hierarchies and moral teachings. It also illustrates how intellectual freedom can be perceived as a threat when it disrupts the status quo. The culmination of these tensions led to Socrates' trial in 399 BC. He was formally charged with impiety, disrespecting the gods recognized by the state, and corrupting the youth of Athens. The trial, as recounted in Plato's Apology, presents Socrates defending his life's work with unwavering commitment to truth and reason. He argued that his mission was divinely inspired, a pursuit of wisdom meant to improve the moral and intellectual life of his fellow citizens. He insisted that questioning and dialogue were not acts of subversion, but essential tools for cultivating virtue, understanding, and the good life. Despite his eloquent defense, the jury found him guilty. Socrates' trial and execution illustrate the tension between individual conscience and societal expectations. His insistence on questioning authority and challenging conventional wisdom made him a target in a city that valued adherence to tradition and conformity. Yet Socrates did not waver in his principles. He refused to abandon his philosophical mission, even when offered opportunities to escape or recant. By accepting the penalty of death, Socrates demonstrated the depth of his moral and intellectual integrity, showing that living a virtuous and examined life was more important than personal safety. This act of courage solidified his legacy as a philosopher committed to truth above all else. The method and nature of Socrates' execution also carry symbolic significance. He was sentenced to drink hemlock, a form of capital punishment in Athens, and faced death calmly, engaging in philosophical discussion with his followers until the end. This final act reinforced the central tenets of his philosophy. Reason, virtue, and ethical consistency must guide human life, even in the face of mortality. Socrates' execution became a powerful lesson for future generations, illustrating that the pursuit of truth often requires courage, sacrifice, and adherence to principle in opposition to societal pressures. Socrates' death also sparked reflection on the role of philosophy and free inquiry in society. His challenge to Athenian beliefs and the consequences he faced highlight the inherent risks of questioning deeply held assumptions. Yet it also demonstrates the transformative potential of such questioning. Socrates' willingness to confront ignorance and injustice inspired his students, particularly Plato, to preserve and expand upon his teachings. Through Plato's dialogues and the work of later philosophers, the ideas that once provoked hostility in Athens became foundational to Western philosophy, ethics, and education. Socrates' life and death exemplify how challenging conventional wisdom can lead to societal tension, but also to enduring intellectual and moral progress. The trial and execution of Socrates underscore several enduring lessons about human society and philosophy. First, critical questioning is essential for ethical and intellectual development. Socrates' challenges to Athenian beliefs reveal that unquestioned traditions can perpetuate ignorance or injustice. Second, the pursuit of truth may conflict with social norms, requiring courage and integrity. Socrates' willingness to accept death rather than abandon his principles demonstrates the importance of moral consistency. Third, the legacy of such challenges depends on the preservation and transmission of ideas. Plato's recordings of Socratic dialogues ensured that the lessons of Socrates' life and his method of questioning would endure, influencing generations long after his death. In conclusion, Socrates' challenge to traditional Athenian beliefs and the resulting trial and execution in 399 BC are central to understanding his revolutionary impact. His relentless questioning exposed contradictions in societal norms, ethical assumptions, and religious beliefs, making him both admired and controversial. By facing death without compromising his principles, Socrates exemplified the integration of intellectual inquiry and moral courage. His trial underscores the tension between individual conscience and societal expectations, demonstrating that philosophical inquiry is not always comfortable or accepted, but is essential for growth of human understanding. Through the preservation of his teachings by Plato and others, Socrates' challenge to Athens became a timeless lesson in the value of critical thinking, ethical reflection, and the pursuit of truth, influencing philosophy, education, and society for millennia. One of the most enduring and profound principles of Socratic philosophy is the assertion that wisdom begins with recognizing one's own ignorance. This idea, often summarized by the famous declaration, "I know that I know nothing," lies at the heart of Socrates' approach to knowledge, ethics, and human understanding. While it may seem paradoxical at first that knowing nothing is a form of wisdom, this concept reflects a deep insight into the nature of learning, self-awareness, and intellectual humility. By examining why Socrates emphasized this principle, how it shaped his philosophical method, and its enduring influence on thought, we can appreciate its significance both in ancient Athens and in contemporary contexts. Socrates lived in a period of intellectual vibrancy in Athens, where traditional beliefs, religious practices, and social norms dominated public and private life. Many citizens, including politicians, poets, and artisans, believed themselves to possess knowledge and wisdom. Socrates observed that much of this confidence was unfounded. People claimed to know what was just, virtuous, or pious, yet when subjected to careful questioning, their definitions and reasoning often proved inconsistent or shallow. This observation led Socrates to a revolutionary insight. True wisdom does not consist in accumulating facts or asserting certainty, but in acknowledging the limits of one's own understanding. The principle of recognizing one's ignorance has profound epistemological implications. Socrates distinguished between opinion and knowledge, understanding that people often speak confidently about subjects they only partially understand. By admitting ignorance, individuals open themselves to inquiry, reflection, and learning. In other words, acknowledging what one does not know is not a sign of weakness or failure, but a prerequisite for acquiring genuine knowledge. This approach contrasts sharply with arrogance or dogmatism, which assumes knowledge where there is none. Socratic wisdom, therefore, is fundamentally humble and self-critical, grounded in the recognition that learning is an ongoing process rather than a fixed state. This emphasis on ignorance also underpins Socrates' famous method of questioning, the Socratic method. By engaging others in dialogue, Socrates exposed contradictions in their thinking, encouraging them to confront the limits of their knowledge. When individuals realized that their understanding was incomplete or inconsistent, they were prompted to reflect more deeply and seek clarity. This process demonstrates the practical function of Socratic humility. Recognizing one's ignorance motivates inquiry and intellectual growth. Far from discouraging engagement, it fosters curiosity, critical thinking, and the pursuit of truth. In this sense, Socratic wisdom is not merely theoretical, but actively cultivates the mind. Ethically, Socrates' recognition of ignorance has significant implications for human behavior. By acknowledging the limits of one's understanding, individuals are less likely to act impulsively or arrogantly. Socratic thought links knowledge and virtue, asserting that to act rightly, one must first understand what is good. Recognizing ignorance is the first step toward this understanding. Without self-awareness, people may make decisions based on incomplete knowledge, assumptions, or societal pressure, leading to injustice or moral error. Socrates' insight encourages ethical reflection, as individuals who recognize their limitations are more cautious, thoughtful, and responsible in their choices. Socrates' recognition of ignorance also challenges societal notions of authority and expertise. In Athens, individuals often deferred to political leaders, religious authorities, or cultural elites, assuming that their positions conferred knowledge. Socrates demonstrated that titles and status do not guarantee understanding. Wisdom requires self-awareness and critical examination. By admitting his own ignorance, Socrates positioned himself as a model of intellectual integrity, showing that humility is more valuable than superficial authority. This approach democratizes knowledge, suggesting that anyone willing to question, reflect, and learn can pursue wisdom, regardless of social status or formal education. The philosophical implications of recognizing ignorance extend to the concept of continual learning. Socrates understood that human understanding is always partial and provisional. By admitting ignorance, one remains open to new ideas, evidence, and perspectives, avoiding stagnation or dogmatism. This mindset encourages lifelong inquiry, fostering intellectual flexibility and resilience. It is a recognition that learning is a journey rather than a destination, and that the acknowledgement of what we do not know is the first step toward deeper comprehension. In this sense, Socratic wisdom is dynamic and evolving, always responsive to reflection and reasoned dialogue. Socrates' emphasis on acknowledging ignorance also has pedagogical significance. In teaching and mentorship, Socratic humility encourages active engagement, questioning, and critical thinking. By demonstrating that even a philosopher like Socrates does not claim absolute knowledge, students are invited to think independently, explore ideas critically, and accept that learning involves grappling with uncertainty. This approach contrasts with didactic methods that emphasize memorization and passive absorption of information. Socratic pedagogy, grounded in self-awareness and humility, cultivates minds capable of reasoning, reflection, and ethical discernment. Moreover, Socratic recognition of ignorance provides a foundation for dialogue and cooperation. By admitting what one does not know, individuals approach conversations with openness, curiosity, and respect for others' perspectives. This humility facilitates constructive discussion and shared exploration of ideas. It reduces intellectual arrogance, fosters empathy, and encourages collaborative problem solving. In social, political, and academic contexts, the willingness to acknowledge limitations can lead to more thoughtful, informed, and equitable decision-making. Socratic wisdom, therefore, is not merely individual but also relational, promoting intellectual and moral growth within communities. Historically, Socrates' insistence on recognizing ignorance contributed to both admiration and opposition. Many Athenians were inspired by his commitment to truth, critical inquiry, and ethical reflection. However, others found his challenges to conventional wisdom unsettling. By exposing ignorance in others, Socrates threatened established authorities and social norms, ultimately leading to his trial and execution in 399 BC. Yet even in the face of death, Socrates maintained his philosophical principles, demonstrating that acknowledging one's limitations and pursuing wisdom requires courage, integrity, and moral consistency. His life illustrates that true knowledge is inseparable from ethical conduct and the courage to act according to reasoned conviction. The enduring legacy of Socratic humility is evident in its influence on Western philosophy and education. Philosophers such as Plato, Aristotle, and countless others have adopted and expanded upon the principle that self-awareness and critical inquiry are essential to wisdom. Modern educational approaches, including inquiry-based learning, reflective practice, and critical thinking frameworks, draw inspiration from Socratic ideas. Recognizing one's ignorance remains a foundational concept in philosophy, psychology, and pedagogy, demonstrating that Socratic wisdom is timeless and universally applicable. In conclusion, Socrates' emphasis on recognizing one's own ignorance represents a profound and transformative understanding of human knowledge and ethics. Far from promoting despair or passivity, this principle encourages curiosity, humility, and a commitment to lifelong learning. It underscores the importance of self-awareness, critical reflection, and ethical responsibility, shaping both individual character and communal life. By admitting what we do not know, we open ourselves to discovery, dialogue, and moral growth, embodying the essence of Socratic wisdom. This enduring insight continues to guide thinkers, educators, and individuals seeking to live thoughtfully, act ethically, and pursue knowledge with integrity. Socrates, the classical Athenian philosopher, is widely regarded as a foundational figure in Western philosophy. His approach to knowledge, ethics, and inquiry transformed the intellectual landscape of his time and set the stage for centuries of philosophical thought. Socrates' emphasis on critical thinking, moral reflection, and dialogue created a framework that subsequent philosophers would build upon, influencing not only his immediate students but the entire trajectory of Western intellectual history. To understand the magnitude of his contribution, it is essential to examine how Socratic philosophy laid the foundation for Western thought, and why it has had such a profound and lasting impact. Socrates' philosophy was revolutionary in its focus on the individual and human experience. While earlier Greek thinkers, such as the pre-Socratics, were primarily concerned with natural philosophy, questions about the cosmos, the elements, and the underlying structure of universe, Socrates turned attention inward to questions of human conduct, virtue, and knowledge. He asked fundamental questions: what is justice? What does it mean to live a good life? What constitutes knowledge and wisdom? By prioritizing ethical and epistemological inquiry, Socrates established a framework in which philosophy is directly concerned with human life, behavior, and the pursuit of truth. This focus on practical and moral questions became a hallmark of Western philosophical tradition. One of the key contributions of Socrates to Western thought is his method of inquiry, known today as the Socratic method. This method relies on dialogue, questioning, and critical examination to expose inconsistencies in thought and stimulate deeper understanding. Rather than presenting doctrines or dogmas, Socrates engaged individuals in conversation, probing their beliefs, assumptions, and reasoning. Through careful questioning, he encouraged self-reflection and intellectual humility, famously asserting that true wisdom begins with recognizing one's own ignorance. This method not only shaped his immediate disciples, but also became a central technique in philosophical pedagogy, influencing generations of thinkers and educators. The Socratic method exemplifies the Western philosophical commitment to reasoned argument, logical analysis, and the pursuit of truth through dialogue rather than blind acceptance. Socrates' influence on Western thought is inseparable from his role as a teacher, particularly through his students, most notably Plato. Plato preserved Socratic philosophy in his dialogues, using Socrates as the central figure to explore questions of ethics, politics, metaphysics, and epistemology. Through Plato, the principles of Socratic inquiry, questioning, critical examination, and ethical reflection were codified and transmitted to future generations. Plato's work laid the intellectual foundation for Aristotle, who would further develop systematic philosophy and science, creating a continuum of Western thought rooted in Socratic principles. Without Socrates' original insights and the preservation of his ideas by Plato, much of the subsequent development of Western philosophy might have taken a very different path. Socrates' emphasis on ethical inquiry also deeply shaped Western moral philosophy. His insistence that virtue and knowledge are inseparable, that to know the good is to do the good, set the stage for centuries of reflection on ethics, morality, and human conduct. Philosophers such as Aristotle, the Stoics, and later Christian thinkers drew upon the Socratic conception of virtue as rational and deliberate, integrating these ideas into broader systems of moral thought. Even in modern times, the principles that Socrates championed, critical self-examination, the alignment of knowledge and action, and the moral responsibility to question injustice, remain central to ethical reflection and philosophical discourse. The foundational nature of Socratic philosophy is further evident in its influence on political thought. By emphasizing reason, moral reflection, and the ethical responsibilities of citizens, Socrates introduced a framework for thinking critically about justice, governance, and civic duty. Plato's political writings, inspired by Socratic inquiry, explore ideal forms of government, the role of knowledge in leadership, and the ethical obligations of rulers. These ideas influenced not only later philosophers, but also the development of political theory in Western civilization, including concepts that underpin modern democratic thought, such as the importance of informed citizenry, moral integrity, and rational deliberation in governance. Socrates also shaped Western epistemology by emphasizing the importance of recognizing the limits of one's knowledge. His principle that wisdom begins with acknowledging one's ignorance introduced a critical approach to understanding the world, one that values questioning, evidence, and reason over assumption and authority. This epistemological humility became a cornerstone of Western thought, informing the methods of inquiry that characterize scientific reasoning, philosophy, and intellectual exploration. By demonstrating that knowledge is provisional and subject to critical examination, Socrates influenced the development of rational, evidence-based approaches to understanding reality, which continue to guide scientific, philosophical, and educational practices today. Beyond specific philosophical contributions, Socrates' life itself became a model for intellectual integrity and moral courage, further solidifying his foundational role in Western thought. His willingness to challenge prevailing norms, question authority, and face death, rather than compromise his principles, set a standard for ethical consistency and intellectual honesty. Socrates' trial and execution in 399 BC illustrate the costs of philosophical inquiry in the face of societal pressure, but they also demonstrate the enduring power of ideas that prioritize reason, truth, and ethical reflection over convenience or conformity. This example has inspired countless philosophers, reformers, and thinkers throughout Western history to pursue knowledge and virtue with courage and integrity. Socrates' foundational influence also extends to educational philosophy. The Socratic method, grounded in dialogue and critical questioning, remains central to modern pedagogy. Law schools, philosophy programs, and debate societies use this approach to cultivate reasoning, reflection, and ethical judgment. By teaching students to examine assumptions, articulate arguments, and engage in reasoned dialogue, Socratic principles foster critical thinking skills that are essential for intellectual growth and responsible citizenship. In this way, Socratic philosophy continues to shape Western education, reinforcing its role as a cornerstone of thought and learning. Finally, Socrates' philosophy has endured because it addresses timeless questions about human existence, morality, and knowledge. His insistence on inquiry, self-reflection, and ethical reasoning transcends cultural and historical boundaries, providing a framework for understanding human life that remains relevant today. By laying the foundations of ethical, epistemological, and political inquiry, Socrates created a philosophical legacy that has influenced countless thinkers, shaped Western intellectual history, and continues to guide the pursuit of wisdom, virtue, and justice. Socrates, the classical Athenian philosopher, left a legacy that has transcended time and geography, continuing to inspire education, ethics, and critical thinking worldwide. Although he lived more than 2,000 years ago, the principles he championed remain remarkably relevant in contemporary society. Through his emphasis on inquiry, dialogue, and moral reflection, Socrates established a foundation for intellectual and ethical development that has influenced not only philosophy but also education, systems, civic life, and individual self-improvement. Examining how Socratic ideas endure today illuminates the profound and ongoing impact of his legacy. One of the most prominent aspects of Socrates' enduring influence is in the realm of education. Socratic principles form the basis of what is known as the Socratic method, a pedagogical approach that emphasizes questioning, dialogue, and critical thinking rather than passive absorption of information. In modern classrooms, from philosophy courses to law schools, educators employ Socratic questioning to stimulate student engagement and deeper understanding. Students are encouraged to articulate their reasoning, examine assumptions, and defend their positions through dialogue. This method cultivates intellectual curiosity, analytical skills, and the ability to reason rigorously, all of which are essential for effective learning. By emphasizing the process of inquiry over rote memorization, Socratic inspired education nurtures independent thinking and lifelong learning, ensuring that students develop the capacity to think critically in diverse contexts, Beyond formal education, Socratic philosophy continues to influence ethical thought and moral reasoning. Socrates' insistence that virtue and knowledge are interconnected, that understanding what is good naturally leads to acting rightly, has shaped centuries of moral philosophy. His approach encourages individuals to reflect on their actions, question assumptions about right and wrong, and seek coherence between beliefs and behavior. In contemporary society, this emphasis on ethical reflection informs discussions on professional ethics, social responsibility, and civic engagement. For example, business leaders, medical professionals, and public servants often draw upon Socratic principles when evaluating decisions that impact others, highlighting the relevance of his ideas in guiding moral judgment and principled action in practical settings. Critical thinking, a cornerstone of Socratic philosophy, is another domain where his legacy endures. Socrates taught that true wisdom begins with recognizing one's own ignorance and approaching knowledge with humility. This recognition fosters a mindset that is skeptical of assumptions, open to evidence, and committed to reasoned analysis. In today's world, where information is abundant but often conflicting or misleading, Socratic principles are invaluable. Individuals trained in critical thinking are better equipped to assess the credibility of sources, analyze arguments logically, and avoid cognitive biases. This application of Socratic wisdom extends beyond academics and professional life into everyday decision-making, empowering people to navigate complex social, political, and technological challenges with discernment and reason. Socrates' influence on contemporary education also extends to the development of problem-solving and collaborative learning. His dialogical approach models how cooperative inquiry can lead to shared understanding and innovative solutions. In classrooms and workplaces alike, the practice of questioning, debating, and reflecting collectively encourages participants to consider multiple perspectives, identify gaps in knowledge, and refine ideas through discussion. This method not only enhances intellectual rigor, but also fosters communication skills, empathy, and collaborative engagement, qualities essential for success in modern, interconnected societies. Socratic dialogue demonstrates that knowledge is not merely a personal achievement, but a collective endeavor that thrives through thoughtful interaction. The ethical dimension of Socratic legacy continues to resonate in contemporary social and political contexts. Socrates' willingness to challenge societal norms and question authority underscores the importance of moral courage and principled reasoning. Citizens who engage in critical reflection, question injustices, and advocate for ethical governance embody the enduring spirit of Socratic inquiry. Movements for social reform, human rights, and democratic accountability are often informed by the same principles that guided Socrates: a commitment to truth, reasoned judgment, and moral integrity. In this way, Socratic philosophy transcends the classroom, influencing civic life and promoting a culture of ethical awareness and responsibility. Socrates' teachings also inform modern philosophy, psychology, and even cognitive sciences. The emphasis on self-reflection, examination of assumptions, and the iterative process of questioning has parallels in contemporary approaches to cognitive development and critical reasoning. Practices such as reflective journaling, metacognition, and mindfulness share a philosophical lineage with Socratic inquiry, encouraging individuals to observe their thoughts, identify biases, and cultivate self-awareness. In professional development, coaching, and therapy, Socratic questioning is used to help individuals clarify goals, evaluate decisions, and align actions with values, demonstrating the broad Applicability of his legacy across disciplines. Historically, Socratic principles shaped not only his direct students, like Plato and Xenophon, but also countless philosophers, scientists, and educators who followed. Plato's dialogues preserved the Socratic method and ethical inquiry, transmitting these ideas to Aristotle and subsequent generations. The Renaissance, Enlightenment, and modern educational movements all drew inspiration from Socratic ideals, emphasizing reason, debate, and moral reflection as essential tools for personal and societal advancement. In essence, Socrates created a philosophical and pedagogical framework that continues to guide intellectual and ethical development worldwide. The universality of Socratic ideas also contributes to their continued relevance. The focus on questioning, reflection, and moral responsibility resonates across cultures and disciplines. Whether in ethics, science, politics, or personal growth, Socratic principles encourage a thoughtful, reflective approach to life. By fostering curiosity, humility, and rational inquiry, Socratic philosophy empowers individuals to confront uncertainty, evaluate evidence, and pursue wisdom. This enduring applicability demonstrates that Socratic thought is not confined to a historical period or geographic region, but continues to shape human understanding and behavior globally. Finally, the legacy of Socrates is a testament to the power of ideas to transcend time. Through his method of inquiry, emphasis on ethical reflection, and commitment to intellectual humility, Socrates provided tools for education, moral reasoning, and critical thinking that remain essential in the modern world. His influence is visible in classrooms, professional fields, public discourse, and personal development, reflecting the enduring relevance of his teachings. By inspiring individuals to question assumptions, reflect on values, and pursue knowledge with integrity, Socrates' philosophy continues to cultivate thoughtful, ethical, and rational citizens, capable of contributing meaningfully to society. In conclusion, Socrates' legacy persists as a guiding force in education, ethics, and critical thinking worldwide. His principles dialogue, questioning, recognition of one's own ignorance, and the inseparability of knowledge and virtue provide a framework for intellectual and moral development that transcends time and culture. From formal education to personal reflection, from civic engagement to professional ethics, the influence of Socratic thought is pervasive. By encouraging inquiry, reflection, and principled reasoning, Socrates continues to inspire individuals and societies to pursue knowledge, live ethically, and think critically. The enduring relevance of his philosophy demonstrates that Socratic wisdom is not merely historical, but a living, dynamic force that shapes how humans learn, act, and engage with the world.